All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Last week was wonderful. This is class number 2 on the Emunah Chevra that we're calling it, which means a group of friends. And as a reminder, I just wanted to go over the homework from last week, which was to write a couple things down and create a gratitude list or gratitude notebook, whatever you want to call it. So, first of all, if you did do the homework, maybe somebody could volunteer. The first thing I'd like to know is how did it make you feel as you started doing it? Maybe a minute later, 2 minutes later, what kind of feelings did it start? Did it start bringing anything up? Also, maybe you could talk a little bit about did it help you during the week, during this last week, and also. Did it come up, or did you remember it at any certain time during the week, and did it help you at all? Anybody?
Well, I felt wonderful.
Yeah.
Because I began thinking about things at that moment, things in my past,
Mm-hmm.
wishes, dreams, people, everything. I think Ron and Deb are in there at least 3 or 4 times.
Oh, that's so sweet. So it felt good. You're saying like you felt like a warm
good.
feeling, a happy feeling.
Yeah, it's like think of all these wonderful things in my life, and think of the gifts that I've been given,
Mm-hmm.
and that includes even the going.
Right, the little things, like the annoying things, maybe
Yes.
the irritating
That's
things.
What that symbol. That's what that. Face
So did you
is.
write down any things that were maybe not so positive, or maybe like shortcomings or challenges, maybe?
Let's see.
Because that's another column that I recommend adding to the list would be challenges. Challenges, because we're actually supposed to thank Hashem for the challenges, for our shortcomings, for our weaknesses, for the things that we're lacking. Do you know that the ultimate part of the Shemona Esrei, the prayer, the standing prayer that we say 3 times a day, is called Modim. It's the climax of the prayer, and Modim, and it's all about gratitude. And in it we thank Hashem for giving us what to thank Him. We thank you for the things that you've given me, and thank you for creating. And basically, what you're saying is, thank you, Hashem, for my lackings. Thank you for giving me things to ask you for, and to talk to you about, and to thank you. So that's really special. That is like the essence of the whole prayer is about gratitude. And so anybody else want to talk about maybe when they were doing the homework this week, how they felt, if it brought up any feelings, or it's okay if you don't want to.
I would say, under the column of possessions,
Mm-hmm.
I guess like this house is a big possession,
Sure.
and it has been a lot to handle the first year and a half. There was a lot of things that just kind of broke down on it,
Mm-hmm.
and it was really aggravating. But I just kind of stuck to it.
Okay.
I mean, there's probably times when I said, I wish I had stayed in Charlottesville, and
Okay.
I
Right.
would be so much ahead in my
Okay.
spiritual journey. But I think that one of the things that I've learned is, some of, I don't want to say the curses, but the things that are hard in your life, or the things that Hashem gives you so that you learn maybe to be humble,
Mm.
or modest,
Very-
or it's an obstacle that you have to get through, and it's an obstacle that is going to teach you something.
Very good.
And in the end, it's like about a month ago, I had a thing here for the women with Rapunzel for
Oh, cool.
headscarves, and all these women were here, and
Exactly. So that's exactly right. And what you said was the essence of this whole class is that everything, not just the fun stuff, but everything that happens to us in life is for our ultimate benefit. Like you
Right.
said, to grow in some mita, to change something, to learn humility, to learn patience,
Yeah.
to learn anger, or, to
Control
the anger, right? So
Yeah.
very, very good. Okay, so moving right along, I wanted to start off by talking about this book. It's called the Chavos Halavavos, otherwise known as Duties of the Heart. And this is part of the Torah Classics library. And almost every single yeshiva, boy and girl coming up, learning about faith, almost everybody has read this series. I highly recommend it if you haven't gotten a chance.
Does it have an ISBN number in the inside?
It does, and we can talk about that. I can give you that information later. So this is if you get this pocket version to carry around, there's 2 books. Otherwise, you can get it all in one nice size book. But specifically, section 4, which is called the Gate of Trust in God. So remember last week we spoke about Emunah, and we also said that the other side of the coin of Emunah is bitachon, which is trust. And remember we gave the example that Emunah could be like, I believe that this chair really does exist. And bitachon is that you sit down in it and you're not afraid to sit down in it because you have a certain level of trust in the American manufacturing standards of a chair, and it looks okay, so you sit down without too much fear and too much anxiety. So if you would like, do you need to go turn that off, or is that something that is calling you?
Oh, I didn't even hear it.
Yeah, that's okay. So in this
How do
section
you
4,
spell bitachon?
bitachon, I guess the English spelling would be Bitachon.
Okay.
Not to be confused with Bitcoin, which we certainly don't trust in because it's not a good thing. I know some people say it is, some people say it isn't. But the point is that the author here, he says something very, very poignant, which is that among the benefits in religious life, he's talking about the benefits of bitachon, the benefits of trust in God. Among its benefits to him in religious life is tranquility of soul in reliance on God, as the servant is bound to rely on his master. For if a person does not put his trust in God, he places his trust in what is other than God. And whoever trusts in what is other than God, God removes his providence from him and leaves him in the hands of whatever he trusted in. So, you put all your trust in your the stocks that you bought? Okay, well, guess what? That stock just lost all its value, and you put your trust in your, physical abilities. Well, God forbid, now you're sick, or now you're not able to do that thing, and you have a little injury, and now you can't walk for 6 months. God forbid. So the thing that you put your trust in, he's like, okay, go ahead, and he puts you at the mercy of that thing. So it's kind of a dangerous thing to have trust in anything other than Hashem. If a person relies on his wisdom and his ingenuity, his physical strength, and his own efforts, then he will labor in vain, and his strength will fail him, and his ingenuity will be inadequate to achieve his goal. Further along, the author wants to talk more about the benefits of having trust in God. And he says another advantage of this trust is that it has the following effect. One who trusts in God will not submit to another. He will not set his hopes on any man or put his trust in human beings. He will not be subservient to them in order to win their favor, nor will he flatter them. He will not agree with them in what is not the service of God. Their ways will not frighten him, and he will not be afraid to oppose them. He will divest himself of the finery of their favors and free himself from the burden of expressing gratitude to them and the obligation of repaying them. So another key element is the bravery and that you have, and that you are no longer feel like you owe anything to anybody else because you haven't relied on them, you haven't trusted in them. And David, King David, when he was writing Psalms, he says, even my mother and father have forsaken me. And he's not speaking ill of his parents, but he is saying that, that even your parents, can't always be there for you. And even they, even sometimes they won't be able to come save you, and they won't be able to give you that money or whatever it is that you need. And so, so really only rely on God. There is no other source. And then the author goes into this really cool teaching about how comparing somebody who has bitachon, trust in God, versus somebody who is an alchemist. And more specifically, somebody who makes his own money.
Okay.
So a counterfeiter. So an alchemist back in the times of this author was he would collect different metals and poisonous gases and all sorts of weird things, and through it he would make fool's gold. He would make fake gold. And so the author starts breaking down how this seems like such a sweet thing, because then he'll just always have money and and he breaks down and compares how, the alchemists doesn't have any, he's like paranoid all the time. He's working with dangerous chemicals all the time. He's at risk of being caught and killed by the government all the time. He always has to look for ingredients. He might run out of those ingredients. He might, run out of the things that he needs. And he's like, but a person who trusts in God doesn't have any of these issues, So trust in God is, free, and it's cheap, and it's readily available, and it affects your health in a positive way, as opposed to being an alchemist. Very interesting, really, really good read. I highly recommend the Chavos Halavava. So, moving right along, we also have the Garden of Emunah. This is the Universal Garden of Emunah, and as we said last week, written by Rabbi Shalom Arush, and this book is really, the quintessential. I would say it's like one of the biggest books in the world right now, not just in Judaism, but in the world, because the whole world is learning about Emunah, and we all have to have it regardless. And so there's a big Noahide movement coming out of it, and people are kind of moving away, not necessarily converting to Judaism, but just realizing that they don't need the whole intermediary system. They don't need somebody else who's more pure than them to talk to God, that they can have a personal relationship with God directly. So it's a beautiful thing. And we're going to continue on in chapter 2, which more specifically on page 34, where it's going to talk about the answer to all questions. I'm not sure what page it would be, but if you in the original Garden of Emunah, but yes, in chapter 2, after the first page or two, there should be a subsection called the answer to all questions. And if you don't see it, I'm sorry. I guess this book does have different content. There's one universal answer to all of the questions of life. Emunah. By way of Emunah, everything is clear and understood. There is a creator and a director of the world who watches over every individual with special divine providence, otherwise known as hashgacha pratis. He determines the exact conditions of a person's life, to which family he'll be born, who he'll marry, what his appearance will be like, what his personality characteristics will be like, how many children he'll have, how much money he'll have, who his friends will be, and many, many more details, more than the grains of sand on the beach. Even down to the tiniest minutia, your eye color, everything is directly from God. Divine providence, hashgacha pratis, not only determines events on a general scale, but the daily events of each individual. The Creator decides when we succeed and when we fail, when times are easy and when they're hard, and infinite more details. The Creator's protective care and supervision is constant and always for our ultimate welfare, designed to direct a person to his objective in life, the reason he was born and put on this earth. The Creator sees that a certain person needs certain circumstances to fulfill his mission in life. His deficiencies and disadvantages are the conditions that one person needs to fulfill this specific objective. Yet another person needs a life of riches and comfort. Yet everything in everyone's life is the product of personal and precision divine providence. There is no happenstance, no coincidence, and no mistakes. So incredible. The author is really just spelling it out very simply, and for a lot of people this is push it. This is very straightforward. Of course, this is obvious. But for people like me, for me, I'm a beginner. I need this kind of stuff. I need it to be spelled out like this. Because that made me feel really good. Mm-hmm. To know that God is not just, running the whole world, but that he's intimately involved in the minutia of my life. Suddenly, like we said last week, the atheist who dies younger because he's freaking out and he's alone in this cold, harsh world. Mm-hmm. Here I am, the opposite, feeling loved and taken care of, and how every single thing, every challenge I've ever had in my life and every step of my life has been divinely ordained and created and guided by my loving Father in heaven. That's the kind of existence that I need in the world, and that's the kind of emunah and bitachon that makes you feel good. Remember, we said that this class is about practical application. Mm-hmm. Emunah is in here, and bitachon is out here in our lives, in our blood pressure, in our anxiety levels, right? Uh-huh. So that makes me feel a lot less anxious when I think of a God who is intimately involved in my life and not just sitting far away up there in the heavens, on some throne or in front of 1,000 screens like in the Matrix or whatever it is. Just that doesn't make me feel very good. But what makes me feel very good is that God is here with me, intimately involved. So moving right along in the Garden of Emunah, now I want to switch over to page 36, and we're going to talk about the beginning of Emunah. The Book of Splendor says that the beginning of Emunah is the awareness that in addition to a physical world, there is a spiritual world as well. Nachman of Breslov implores us to remember the world to come, the spiritual world. Indeed, he must regard the spiritual world as the only world. Why?
It's the real world. It's
right, the Olam
world.
HaEmes, exactly. You remember? We spoke about that in our Saturday morning classes that we do. So, right, we are not bodies having a spiritual experience. Mm-hmm. We are spirits. That is our real existence, having a bodily experience. We're spirits that exist. We have to come here, have this whole weird, trip down here and grow and fix all the different problems and the things that our spirits have accumulated or whatever. And then we get to go back to our real existence and, with all the points that we've accumulated and with the people we've become. Remember last week we said that we are like pottery. And so in this world we are malleable, we can still be formed, we can add a handle, but once you put the pottery in the kiln and you fire it, it is now boom, it is now what it is going to be like for the rest of its existence. So that's why we're here, that's why we're working on Emunah, and that's why we're constantly working on our personality traits and trying to be mitaken, trying to fix and correct whatever shortcomings and different things that that we were born with. Mm-hmm. So that's our job, to look at what are our weaknesses. Okay, that's my mission. Because when a person's living life without purpose and meaning, it's not a life worth living. And we see many people, famous people, millionaires, killing themselves. Just with this chase for fulfillment and for a feeling, and there's because the spirit will never be satiated with anything physical. It can only be satiated with spiritual things, with mitzvos, with good deeds, with corrective actions on negative behaviors, on things that you can take with you to the world to come. We all know you can't take your possessions like the Egyptians thought. You can be buried with all your stuff and you can just take it with you to the world to come. Nope. So what really matters is the points you've accumulated, the mitzvahs you've done, the corrective actions you've taken on your spirituality and
I need to ask you a question about
yes,
that
please.
later.
Okay,
I don't
later.
know
Sure,
if
sure.
this would be the appropriate time.
All right, thank you. So, so moving into page. Somebody's phone is going off. Am I the only one that hears that, Ron?
You know how to turn it off?
Oh no, sorry.
This
No worries. It's fine.
next to mine will ring, the one that never does.
Right? Yeah. Okay, so now I wanted to move on to 47, unless anybody had any questions on what we just spoke about, or statements, okay? So page 47 here, we're going to talk about the proof of Emunah. What is proof of Emunah? A person doesn't have to be a genius to prove Emunah, only a desire to see the truth. He must shed any obsession to justify his preconceptions and be willing to listen rather than argue. This is a really interesting point.
Say that again?
A person doesn't have to be a genius to prove Emunah. Only a desire to see the truth. I guess it means there might be a typo there, only that he has to have a desire to see the truth. He must shed any obsession to justify his preconceptions and be willing to listen rather than argue. Then it's possible to prove the truth in one of two ways. The negative way. Sometimes, as with mathematics and science, one cannot prove that a given result is true. So what does one do? One begins a process of elimination to verify what isn't true. Result A, not true. Result B, not true. Result C, not true, and so forth. We finally arrive at a single result that we cannot prove is untrue. Sure, although we can't prove its veracity from a positive approach, the fact that we know that all the other results could be proven untrue, then in a negative way we prove that this result is true. Worldly things can be proven easily. Any one of them that a person would choose to devote his life to is not truth. For what would you say? That the ultimate purpose of life is to invest in something finite, which will one day terminate, like we said? Right? There can therefore be no ultimate purpose in pursuing anything of a material or finite nature. Just like we just said with the Egyptians, the people who think that everything, just the chase for wealth and honor must be all that, life's about. What a scary existence. And so many people have written books, millionaires, successful business owners have written books on the fact that once they had got to a certain level and once they, achieved whatever it was, this, stardom that they had been chasing their whole life, they turned around and they realized that they had sorely wasted their lives and that they didn't even, I forget who it was that wrote, he was at his daughter's wedding, and he got up and he said, I'm just looking around and I don't recognize any of my daughter's friends.
Aww.
And I don't know, and this whole time I was working 80 hours a week because I thought what my kids needed were things. And I didn't realize that they needed me. They needed a parent. It was so heartbreaking. But it was, so again, let's not get to that point in our lives. Let's not get, we're still, today is a new day. Tomorrow's a new day. Every moment is a new moment. Really, in the technological world, we know that a monitor, like a computer monitor, it's constantly refreshing. And that's how it can change the pictures. That's how you can see, something on a screen. And it appears that it's moving because we can't see it with the naked eye because it happens at what's known as 60 gigahertz. And so what that means is that once every second, the entire screen wipes itself and a new image shows up. and then wipes itself, and a new image shows up, and it shows, and to the naked eye, we don't see it. But if you've ever seen like a home video and there's like a monitor in the background, you see like these lines that are moving down the screen. You see, because the video is not happening in real time, it's happening a tiny bit slower. So it slows down, and so if you see a monitor in a video, you'll see that there's lines moving down it. So Hashem is the same way. Hashem operates basically at 60 gigahertz. Because we learned that he's refreshing, he's recreating all of existence every second. And if our job is to be godly, which it is, then we need to refresh all the time. We need to be master refreshers. We need to operate at 60 gigahertz as well, which means that when something knocks us down, or when we stub our toe, God forbid, or something even worse, I don't want to think about it, we have to be master returners. Like, remember that concept from last week, Bali Tshuva? We have to be Bali Tshuva. We have to be people who are bouncy, who are just constantly refreshing. Resilient, good word, exactly. We're constantly refreshing, just like Hashem is. I'm recreating. Yes, I messed up in this moment, but now's a new moment. Now I'm a new person. I'm not the same person I was 5 seconds ago or even 1 second ago. Now, how am I going to have Emunah in this new world, in this new creation, in this new second? And so that is an amazing way for it to not take 6 years to recover from something tragic. That's a great way to take, minutes, hours, but certainly not years. Okay, even if it takes you a couple days, and like we said, there's God wants us. There's a very specific method to mourning, right? We have to sit shiva. We have to sit down for 7 days. We have to, not take a shower. We have to cut our clothing. We have to do, and then 30 days, and then But it's this upward spiral, and so God is showing us that yes, you should mourn. Don't deny the fact that this hurts. I know what I did to you hurts. I know that this, whatever pain that I caused you, but I also want you to, I want you to be a human being and feel the feelings of the pain and the hurt. But don't think of it as like that God is mean and cruel. Think about it like, okay, God, what should I learn from this? What should I learn? How should I be better? How should I take this tragedy and, make a new commitment? And you see it all the time. You see somebody loses a family member to a certain disease, and then they go ahead and they start like a whole foundation based on like awareness and testing for that disease, and they start 10Ks and all. It's amazing. Yeah, so they take the tragedy and they turn it around and they do good with it.
And how do I honor this person who's passed, who I miss
Exactly.
dearly with my own life?
Exactly. So we don't deny our pain. Emunah is not about becoming a robot. It's becoming a master returner. A master returner. Refreshing and moving on. So, now I wanted to, just as another plug for Rabbi Arush, I did mention last week that when I met Rabbi Arush in the Ukraine, in a town called Uman, where Rabbi Nachman is buried, I asked him what's next after the Garden of Emunah. This was like, I met him a couple years after the Garden of Emunah really started becoming like the biggest book in Judaism at that time.
You met this man?
Yes, and he said the Garden of Gratitude. He said this next book, this is the dovetail. This is the other half of the Garden of Emunah. Why? Because the natural reaction of Emunah is gratitude. Gratitude is how we show our Emunah. So when I got pulled over the other day, I was going a little fast. I was going to an interview, whatever it was, and I got pulled over, and I before the policeman even made it to the window, I was thanking Hashem. And I wasn't doing it sarcastically, because that's how it starts off when you don't have such good Emunah. Thanks a lot, Hashem. Thanks a lot, God. This really is great, right? No. But if we can actually turn it into a genuine gratitude and say, you know what? Thank you, Hashem, for whatever reason. God forbid, who knows what would have happened if I was at a certain intersection, which I would have been by now. But luckily, Hashem may have saved me from tragedy. And he's telling me to slow down, and he's telling me something else. You know, I have to sit here and I have to start saying, why is this happening? Instead of just getting caught up in like the why me and like the pity parade.
The bigger picture.
Right, gotta look at the bigger picture. Because why? Because with Emunah, we know that nothing happens by accident. And what's the problem is that it's very easy to focus on the stick that's being wielded. So let's take an example of somebody hitting a dog with a stick.
God.
Right? It's not a nice example, but we'll think about what happens, okay? A dog they're very loving and they're amazing, right? But they're not as intelligent as a person. So if you hit a dog with a stick, the dog will bite the stick. The dog will go after the stick and try to get the stick out of your hand and try to chew on it and right? Because of his limited vision, because he only sees the here and now. He sees the person or the thing that's being sent to challenge him, like the police officer. So if I didn't have Emunah, I would start mouthing off to the police officer.
Ooh.
I would start saying terrible things to him, and what do you think you're doing? And why don't you go out there and save the world from the real bad guys? And who knows what kind of chutzpahdik things people say when they don't have Emunah, because they think that this person is like, well, this is the person right in front of me, so like I should approach them. But really, this is just the stick that God's using. So I sit there calmly. I said, I'm sorry, officer. I didn't realize I was going so fast. I actually thought I was keeping the speed limit, but apparently during this time of day, the speed limit changes. And so, but I didn't try to do that. I just said, I'm so sorry. Yes, please. I am going to an interview. I actually never drive through. Whenever I drive through this part of town, it's a regular speed limit. But because I left early for the interview, it was a lower speed limit. And he said, it's okay, it's fine.
Exactly.
Takes my license, goes back to the car. I'm thanking Hashem the whole time. Thank you, Hashem. Helped me get this job or whatever it was that I was interviewing for. And sure enough, he comes back and he says, you know what? You were very polite. You pulled over right away. And you seem like a really nice person. You were really polite to me. And so I'm just going to let you go with a warning.
Wow,
And it was like amazing, right?
that is amazing.
So you see how different the two situations could have been? I could have if I had just, didn't have Emunah, and if I would have just been rude and mean and hurried and flustered and attacked the stick, who knows what would have happened? He probably would have thrown his whole book of tickets at me, you get this charge and this charge, and you also, bliss, and he would have found something wrong with the car, your mirror's a little off, who knows? Who knows?
Another thing, there is no coincidence. Was it possible that you were brought into his life for a purpose?
Right. Maybe he needed somebody to be nice to him. Because what I say to every officer I meet as he's leaving, I said, by the way, officer, thank you so much for what you do for us. Thank you so much for protecting the public. And I don't know, I could never put on a bulletproof vest every day to go to work. So thank you so much. I'm genuinely very grateful to law enforcement. And he, and this was already after he had, I wasn't kissing